Lee joined the group with Clementine on his hip. The overweight woman immediately noticed Clementine and she smiled. "Aw, look at her. She's so cute," the woman said. "Can I hold her?" Lee turned to Clementine and he asked, "Will you be okay if this nice lady holds you?" "I not mind. You stay?" Clementine asked. "I'll stay," Lee said. He handed the toddler over to the woman who smiled at the baby. "Well, we all know what those things can do out there, so the faster we get this fence up, the better," Sean said as he joined the group. "I want to build a fence," the young boy said with enthusiasm in his voice. "Well, yeah, I need a good foreman. You could sit on the tractor and yell at me when I take a water break," Sean said. "On the tractor? Cool," the boy said. "Duck and I will hop to it," Sean said. "You need any help?" Vince asked. Yeah, you can help me saw off a few 4x4s by length," Sean said. "Okay," Vince said as he followed Sean and the boy Duck to the backyard. Without saying a word, Kenny went over to his truck and began to work on it. Justin looked to Lee and said, "We need to talk." "Okay," Lee said. He looked over at Clementine and said, "I'll be back, Sweet Pea. You just say, I didn't get your name." "I'm Katja," the woman said with a smile. "You could stay with Katja," Lee said. Clementine looked back and forth between Lee and Katja. She seemed torn on whether to stay with the woman, but she finally nodded her head in agreement. "That a girl. I'll be right back," Lee said with a smile. He turned to Justin and nodded his head. Justin then took it as a cue and led Lee away from the rest of the group. They stopped near some corn and then they looked over to make sure that no one was heading their way. He then turned to Lee. "Okay, Lee, why were you in the police officer's car? I'm a little worried, especially when you have a baby with you." Lee sighed. He knew this talk was coming and he looked at Justin and said, "I got in a fight with this man. He and my wife had an affair." Justin's eyes widened and said, "Oh shit. Yeah, I just lost it. I killed them. I killed them both. A lot of things led up to it and," Lee said. "It's okay, man. You don't have to tell me anymore," Justin said. Lee quirked an eyebrow and said, "You okay that I killed 2 people?" "The whole thing was circumstantial," Justin said. "Hell, I'd probably done the same. Besides, it's not my place to judge." Justin then looked around before turning back to Lee. "Look, you're not alone. Vince and I were going to prison before those things started eating people. There was another guy with us and his name was Danny." "Yeah, I could get kind of tell with the shotgun that you were carrying yesterday," Lee said. "Yeah, I did a whole huge Ponzi scheme. I mean, it was very complicated, which is why I didn't get caught immediately," Justin said. "You still got caught though?" Lee said. Justin scoffed and said, "Yeah, I still got caught." Lee nodded and said, "How about Vince?" "I don't know. He said that he got arrested for helping his brother," Justin said. "Huh? That's strange," Lee said. "Yeah, look, I don't know the whole story with Vince, but I trust him. He had to make a hard choice between me and that Danny guy. I'm glad he chose me, because not when I got chose to live. Because Danny, he was accused and probably did something horrible to a 15-year-old girl. I have no idea what the hell would have happened if he was still alive, and we ran into you," Justin explained. Lee felt a shiver down his spine. "Yeah, I think he chose right," Lee said. "I know he did," Justin said. "Anyway, you know our secret, and I know yours. How about we keep it that way?" Lee nodded and said, "I lose Clem if my secret got out." "Won't happen. Vince and I will make sure it doesn't happen," Justin said. Lee nodded and said, "Thanks, Justin." "No problem," Justin said. "I'm going to talk to that Kenny guy." Lee nodded and said, "I'll be with Katja." Justin nodded and walked away over to talk to Kenny, and Lee went back over to Katja and Clementine. Clementine looked up. Upon seeing Lee, that was followed by a frown. "I hungry," Clementine said. Lee smiled and started to tickle the girl's belly. "Your tummy has the rumblies?" Lee said. Clementine giggled in response as she squirmed in Katja's grip. Lee seized in the tickling and started to look for her bag for something to eat. Katja, meanwhile, tried to entertain the toddler. "What does the cow say?" Katja said. "Moo," Clementine replied. "What does the kitty say?" Katja said. Meow, Clementine said. What did the doggy say? Katja said. Wolf, Clementine said. Good job, Clementine. You know your animals really well, Katja said. Lee finally found some animal crackers, so he also pulled out a sippy cup with juice in it. Here we go, Lee said. He opened up the box of animal crackers and gave one to Clementine. The toddler smiled and she started munching on the animal cracker while also drinking from her sippy cup. You're very good with her, Katja said. Thanks, Lee said. He smiled at the toddler who continued to eat her animal crackers. After a couple minutes, Lee looked back up to Katja and said, So you won't mind if I ask how you're holding up? I can't imagine what you and your family might have gone through. Katja sighed and said, I appreciate your concern. Kenny just drove. It was horrifying. We passed so many families around before Herschel's. It was just... It's okay. You don't have to say anything else, Lee said. You could tell that Katja was starting to get upset. Katja nodded in response and she said, So sad how it all fell apart. Everything is gone now. Yeah, hopefully we could rebuild some time down the line, Lee said. I guess you do have a point. Still, it won't be easy, Katja said. I done, Clementine said as she finished. She had managed to eat plenty of animal crackers, and then she squirmed in Katja's lap. I walk. Okay, sweetie, Katja said as she placed the girl on the ground. Lee got up and followed the girl. He wanted to make sure that she stayed in sight. They walked around the farm with Clementine enjoying the sights and sounds. She then looked over to the fence and said, They fix? She pointed the finger to the fence. Well, kind of. They're trying to make it stronger to keep the monsters out, Lee said, explained to the toddler. Oh, good, Clementine said. Yes, it is, Lee said. However, they were both interrupted when Sean screamed. The scream frightened Clementine and she started to whimper. Lee then looked over to see that the tracker had somehow moved forward and rolled over to Sean's leg. Monsters! Clementine exclaimed. As a couple of walkers limped over to try to reach Sean, she started crying again. Lee had no choice but to comfort the baby. As much as he wanted to run over and help Sean, he had to think of the baby first. Lee picked up the crying toddler and bobbed her in his arms. Shh, it's okay, baby girl, I gotcha, Lee said. Lee's eyes widened when they saw another walker grab Duck. The little boy screamed for help. However, Lee was still not able to do anything. If he put the toddler down, she'd be crushed. Plus, there was no way that he was going to put her in danger, even to save a couple of boys. Someone rushed over and past Lee in a flash. It was Vince. Stay with her, Lee. We'll handle this, Justin said, as he also ran past him. Lee breathed a sigh of relief. He was thankful that Vince and Justin were around. Vince got on the tractor and pulled Duck away from the walkers with Justin's help. Kenny came running over to the other side of the house and went over for the little boy. He took him from Vince. No doubt that the boy was scared. Vince, Kenny, Justin, I need help, Sean exclaimed. Vince and Justin ran over to get the tractor off of him somehow, but it was no good. The vehicle was too heavy. They only needed one more person to help lift the tractor. Lee then saw them took over to Kenny, but the man started to backpedal. No, Lee muttered. Clementine's cries had calmed down to whimpers, but Lee still couldn't put her down. Kenny! Sean exclaimed. Damn it, come on! Vince exclaimed, as he tried to bring the tractor up high for Sean just to slip away, but it didn't work. Shit! Justin exclaimed as he jumped back. There was a loud crash, and the fence must have shattered under the walker's weight. A loud scream confirmed Lee's suspicion. Clementine started to cry again, but Lee comforted her. But Lee didn't even know if he did the right thing. He saw Herschel ran out with the shotgun. He fired a couple of shots before he looked up and killed the last walker. With the whole situation over, Lee walked back to the scene, and he placed a comforting hand on the toddler's back of the head. He didn't want to see her what was going on. Lee cringed and when he saw Sean's body. His neck had been ripped open and he was bleeding from his leg. He was dead. Kenny and his family also walked over. After several minutes, Herschel stood up and said, Get out. He turned with an angry glare and aimed at the group. Get the fuck out of here. Clementine jumped and started to whimper again, but Lee hushed her and bobbed her in his arms. All of this crying was going to make her tired. I'm sorry, Kenny said. Sorry? Your son is alive. You don't get to be sorry, Herschel snapped. He turned his glare over to Lee and said, And you didn't even try to save him. He had a baby in his arms. What the hell was he supposed to do? Vince snapped. Yeah, Lee did the right thing. He kept the baby safe. That's what's important, Justin said as he glared at Herschel. Herschel returned the glare and said, Just leave. He then turned his back towards his dead son and said, Get out and never come back. Kenny walked up to Justin and said, You got that ride to Macon if you want. He then turned around and started walking away with his family. Ride to Macon? Lee asked. Yeah, that's where Kenny and his family are going, Justin said. I asked him if he could give us a lift. Vince's eyes widened and he looked down. What's wrong? Justin asked. Vince remained silent for a couple of moments before he replied, my family is in Macon. Same here, Lee said. It's different for me, Vincent said. Well, we don't have much of a choice. We've got a baby with us and we won't last long on the road, Lee said. Especially when we don't have a weapon, Justin said. Actually, I'm armed, Lee said. What? Justin asked with wide eyes. Vince was also surprised to hear this. Lee nodded in his head. I picked up this handgun from her house, Lee said as he gestured to the toddler in his arms. He turned to Herschel and back at Vince and Justin. We better get a move on, Lee said. You could tell that Clementine felt more like dead weight in his arms, and she must have fallen asleep from crying. Yeah, Vince said. I'll go get your bag for her, and I'll make sure everything's packed up. Thanks, Lee said with a nod. Vince nodded before walking back to retrieve the backpack. Meanwhile, Lee and Justin walked over to get in Kenny's truck. All right, there's not enough room for us all. You think you and Vince can ride in the truck bed? Kenny asked Justin. Yeah, we won't mind, Justin said. Here we go, Vince said as he brought the backpack over. Thanks, Vince, Lee said. No problem. I guess our next stop is Macon, Vince said. He sounded almost defeated. It seemed like he didn't want to go back to Macon. It's probably the best chance we got in finding help, Kenny said. He turned to work into the truck. It's going to be fine, man. We're going to figure this out, Justin said. Yeah, Vince said. He then walked over and climbed into the truck bed. Justin walked over to join him while Lee carried the backpack and the sleeping toddler over to the truck. Once inside, the truck started down off the road. Lee felt conflicted in going to Macon as well. The last time he saw his family, it wasn't a good day. His mother was hysterical and his father was trying to comfort her. And then there was his brother. He remembered that Bud was sad to see him go. Regardless, it was the safest route at the moment. It was too dangerous to go out there with a baby and no vehicle. And Herschel didn't want him to stay any longer. This was probably the only choice he had. It was late afternoon when the vehicle drove further down the road. Duck was back to his normal self, and he was playing with Clementine. I spy something yellow, Clementine said, with a smile. She was enjoying herself as she played with a much older boy. Lee had to keep her on his lap. He knew that she liked to cuddle, but he still wished that he had a car seat for her. It was dangerous to leave her unfastened in his vehicle. He just had to hope that Kenny didn't get in a wreck. Duck pondered around and looked around. Yellow, yellow, the boy muttered. Then his eyes widened and said, Mom's shirt. Clementine smiled and nodded her head. It's pretty. Katja smiled and said, Well, thank you, Clementine. Okay, my turn, Duck said. I spy... He paused when the vehicle started to sputter. Ken, everything all right? Lee asked. The vehicle continued to sputter as Kenny sighed. The good news is that we're in Macon. The bad news is that we're all out of gas, Kenny said. What do we do? Lee asked, as the vehicle sputtered to a stop. Not much we can do. This is as far as she's taken us, Kenny said. Well, I guess it's far enough, Lee said. He unbuckled his seatbelt and then got out of the car with Clementine. I walk, Clementine said, while Lee got back in to retrieve the backpack. Okay, but I need you to hold my hand, Lee said. He placed the backpack on the ground and he dug out the pacifier. He knew that Clementine would freak out if she saw walkers. Here's your friend, Lee said as he placed the pacifier in her mouth. Clementine smiled under the pacifier, and she looked adorable. Lee smiled back as he placed her on the ground and placed the backpack on. He extended his hand out and took for a smaller hand. A car out of gas? Justin asked as he and Vince climbed out of the back of the truck. Yeah, Kenny said, as he started to look around. Does anyone other than me hear that? They remained silent as a loud buzzing noise could be heard. It sounded like an alarm bell. Wait a minute, Lee said. He then went to the source of the buzzing sound, with Clementine following him. Lee, wait up, Vince said as he ran over to catch up. Justin, Kenny, and Katja and Duck followed behind them. Lee made his way over to the debris of the cars that blocked the roadway. His eyes widened when he saw the pharmacy. His suspicions were confirmed. The pharmacy that his parents owned and his brother worked at was overran. There were walkers all over it. No, Lee said. Kenny, Katja, Duck, and Justin caught up to Lee and looked over to the pharmacy. Everything all right? Kenny asked. That was my folks' store, Lee said. There isn't anything we could do now, Vince said. I'm sorry, but we should take advantage of this opportunity. I bet those things have gathered at the pharmacy. This is our best chance to cut across town safely. Exactly. We need to get back on the road, Kenny said. No, Vince said. We need to find a place to lay low, resupply. There's a motel on the outskirts of Macon. We shouldn't have to deal with any of those walkers and we'll be close enough to do runs. And we'll have beds, Justin said. Kenny was conflicted for a couple of seconds, but he sighed. All right, but it's not a permanent solution, Kenny said. Vince nodded and led the way to the motel. The group followed with Lee, looking around and making sure that there were no walkers nearby as they followed Vince out of the city. He couldn't take his mind off the pharmacy. He just hoped that his parents and his brother were somehow okay.